Welcome to Winning Business. I'm Steve Dorfman here with Tony Marchanti. Likeonomics, Likeonomics. Likeonomics, how to be more believable in the new affinity economy. That's the newest book from best-selling author Rohit Bhargava. Rohit's first book, Personality Not Included, was a big hit. I think Likeonomics is going to be even bigger. It's already gotten tremendous media buzz. And Rohit is here with us today. He is the adjunct professor of global marketing at Georgetown University. He's also senior vice president of global planning and strategy at Ogilvy. Rohit, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
That's a mouthful, and there's a lot more accolades that just
right.
Wow. I mean, we're just really.
You know, it's easy when you write your own bio. You can basically put anything in there. So.
New affinity economy. What are we talking about here?
Well, you know, I think that for a long time, probably forever, people have talked about the things that they like, whether they're products or people or whatever. And I think that what's different today is that now I can tell people who I don't know and people who've never heard of me about all the things that I like and about all the things I don't like. And so to me, the affinity economy is this world where products, companies, businesses are shaped by what people say about them online and offline. And I think that there's a lot of focus on one versus the other. But if you think about your life or my life, I don't only talk to people on Facebook. I talk to people in real life too. And so I think that the bigger ideas and the way that businesses succeed is by focusing on both. And so that's what I really wanted to try and write about.
It has me think about branding, and we've had a couple of branding experts on the show in the past, and I just wonder, how has the world of branding changed? I mean, are we developing our brand, or is our audience developing it for us?
Well, I think you know, there's a lot of people in the branding world and in my marketing world who say, well, you know, you need to give up control, right? That's a common piece of advice. And I think that that's actually a little bit misguided, because what that says to me is, I don't have any power in this. I'll just let people shape what they say. And that's not really how the world works. The way the world works is a company has a point of view and they'll share it, and people have a point of view and they'll share it. And when those two things mix, that's where reality happens, right? So neither one is total reality. I mean, sometimes...
So it's sort of emerging?
Yeah, it's sort of either side. Yeah, so I think that reality is somewhere in between, and I think that's what companies need to realize, particularly with social media, which means that if you're not using social media at all, what you're basically saying is, I give up. You can say whatever you want, because I don't have anything to say. And that's not really the right way to treat a business, is it?
You also talk about a crisis of believability.
Yeah, the crisis of believability is something that I think has been growing for some time. And one of the things I do in the book is I take this historical look at the crisis of believability that would have happened hundreds of years ago and how people addressed it. And the way that people usually addressed it, and rulers, in this case, presidents or kings, usually addressed it was with propaganda. So they would say, here's what the situation is, here's what the world is. And people would kind of see that, whether it was through some form of media, whether it was some oration, through speeches. I mean, if you look at the Romans thousands of years ago, that's how they would convince people that this was what the world was. And I think that fast forward through that, you have a lot of sources of manipulation, and people have kind of become used to that. And if you look at survey after survey of annual trust ratings, you find that the most important questions that they ask are the ones where companies and institutions fail the worst at. So for example, there was a trust survey that was done every year, and this past year, 2011, so last year, they did the survey and they asked the question, how much do you trust business to do what's right or good for society? Less than half of the people said, I trust them to do that. Which means more than 50% of people think that we're just out to make money at all costs. That's the believability crisis. I mean, that's what any business is facing, that people will look at any of your marketing materials, they'll look at you standing there telling them about a product and think to themselves, how is this guy trying to hook me in?
Yeah.
What are they trying to sell me, right?
Now, your first book, Personality Not Included, a bestseller, and obviously there's some synergy here between Likeonomics and Personality Not Included. So how do they fit together?
Well, I like to describe myself as a marketer who's trying to bring more humanity back to business. And I think that's what ties them together. This idea that companies are made of people. And as soon as we start to get away from that with faceless rules, with 25-page long terms and conditions, with all sorts of specific things that customers have to do. Why do they, for example, when you fill out a form, have to give you their name, their address, their zip code, their high school that they went to, when they graduated, their anniversary? I mean, are you ever going to really use any of this stuff, right? So these are the ways that we bring humanity out of business. And the first book is really about how personality and having a personality is a way of fighting back against that. And the second book is about how to build a likable business and how to be more likable as a person, because we trust people that we like.
And what do you say to those folks? Because you talk about how really so much of what we do and the decisions that we make are based on emotions. So what do you say to those folks who still believe that so much of what we do and our decisions are based on logic rather than emotion?
Well, you know, this is a common thing, and I think, first of all, the reason why I think that happens is because none of us want to say that we are emotional decision makers. There's a stigma attached to that, right? If I decide emotionally, that means that I'm not seeing logic, I'm not paying attention to logic. But actually, the way the human brain works, and study after study has shown this, and brain science actually has gotten really, really great in terms of being able to explain to us why we do the things that we do. And that's new. I mean, that's over the last 10, 20 years that we really have gotten that understanding. And one of the things that's come out in multiple best-selling books, whether you look at Predictably Irrational or Sway or Blink or any of these books, they all sort of come to the same foundational theory, which is people are emotional decision makers. They make decisions based on emotions, which is what you said. But I think the reason why people don't really understand that is because they've never really been told that that's the truth. They've been told that that's something that you shouldn't do. You should calm down. You should take a deep breath, right? You should think things through, right? How often do we hear this kind of advice? When actually that's not really what the brain does. And if you look at fascinating studies all the way back from, there's a guy named Antonio Damasio who's done a lot of these sort of brain studies, written multiple books about it. One of the things that he found is he's one of these guys where you know, brain scientists and neurosurgeons, they live for these tragic cases, right, where somebody lost part of their brain, because that's the ultimate way to see what the brain actually does, because somebody lost some piece of it, and now you can say, oh, this person can't do this, therefore that's what that part of the brain controlled. And so essentially what they found was that the people who had lost the part of their brain that controlled emotion were unable to make decisions. They had the logic part of their brain, but you asked them, where would you like to go to dinner? And they would go back and forth between the food that they liked and the place that was closer for 8 hours. Couldn't decide.
Oh my gosh.
And it wasn't based on logic. It was based on emotion. So emotion was the decision maker in our brains. That's proven.
Right.
But we don't hear that.
Wow. Really powerful. I mean, we see it written about so much and talked about so much. I mean, the E-myth, Michael Gerber talks about this. I think he says at least 90% based on emotion. But there are people that argue, and you know, if you've done any kind of sales training, they talk about it, that it really is at least 90%, maybe 100% emotion based on what you just said. Just amazing. It goes to prove that we don't know ourselves as well as we think we know ourselves. Right? That's just true. Amazing. You also talk about the power of story.
Yes. I think we as people are hardwired to listen to that power of storytelling, and we want to hear stories. I mean, when I write, I teach. I'm a professor, and so I should write in that academic kind of style. I've read so many books like that. That's not the style that I like to write in. What I like to write about is stories. And so one of the opening stories of the book is about this great guy who's a friend of mine, actually. And he was a lawyer for the beginning of his career. Went to law school, but it wasn't really what he wanted to do. He had this dream of becoming an NFL sports agent. And that's a pretty tough career to break into if you don't have the right connections. Because I mean, who wouldn't want to be an agent, work with the NFL, right? It's the most popular sport in America, easily. So he finally decided that he was going to meet up with this guy who was already a sports agent. They ended up teaming up. And the reason why they teamed up was because they had the same philosophy of being an agent. And if you've ever worked, I mean, I have an agent myself as an author. And yeah, I'm lucky because I have a great agent. But a lot of times the agents just follow the money. So if you have an agent that has 12 players as their clients, they're just going to pay attention to the top 2 that are going to make the $1 million deals, right? And not the other ones. Whereas these guys said, you know what, our philosophy is going to be different. We're going to treat every athlete as a man first, and as a sport, as an athlete, second. So what's the impact that athlete's going to have on the community? We're going to pay enough attention to that and not just how are you going to maximize whatever you do for your sport. So they had a client that was that was pretty good, and his name was Cecil Newton. He was an offensive lineman, so if you watch football, I mean, that's not a glory position, right? Offensive linemen, they do their job and they get paid for it, but they're very rarely the guy on the Wheaties box, right? But he did all right, and they finally got him a contract on the practice squad, and he ended up sort of graduating and got to play for, I think, the Jaguars or something like that. Decent story. NFL's filled with stories like that. But they work really hard for the guy, and he's just an offensive lineman. 3 years later, his brother graduates. His brother wins the Heisman Trophy, is highly anticipated to go at least in the top 10, and there's 15 agencies all trying to become his sports agent. So they go in, and they get the only reason they're a small agency, the only reason they get a chance to even meet with him was because the father of both of these guys had such a positive experience with them. He said, I can guarantee you, you'll get a meeting. The older brother's name is Cam Newton. He ends up going #1 in the NFL draft, and he has his rookie season this past season and broke all kinds of records as a quarterback, and they landed him as a client. And the reason why they did that was because of this personal connection. And so the reason why I use that as an example and as a story is because it's such a powerful proof point that the personal relationships that we build are the biggest impact that we'll have in our business and in our lives. And the people who end up focusing on that and not focusing on just driving the next sale and the next sale and the next sale, those are the people who succeed.
Very good. You also talk about something called micro-expertise. My spell check didn't like that word, but I think I get it. So tell us, what is micro-expertise and why is it important?
Well, I think micro-expertise on some level is that everyone's an expert in something. And the world used to be set up in such a way that you either did what you were an expert in for your career or you didn't. And you had all of these people of the earlier generation who loved art and were maybe great at art, but they decided to become a car salesman. And now, they kind of left art on the side. And there wasn't really a way for them to keep pursuing that, even though technically they might have had the exact same training as somebody who became an artist. They might have gone to school for it. They might have even spent time in a studio somewhere. But then they moved away from it. And now with the internet and with social media, you have this world where people can explore those second parts of themselves and become experts in that thing that they really love. The thing that they minored in college can become the thing that they spend the most time on now. And actually, a lot of people can start making money on that.
Yeah.
And now, all of a sudden, you have this ability for people who are stuck, quote-unquote stuck, right? Not a word that entrepreneurs like to use by definition, right? Because if you're stuck, you just break out and you start your own company. But a lot of people don't do that, right? I mean, there's a lot of family pressure. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might dream of that, but never quite do it. But now with social media and all of these internet tools, you're able to take that passion, explore it, start something on the side. You don't necessarily need to become an entrepreneur. One of my favorite words, by the way, that I use all the time, and actually it sort of describes me as well, is intrapreneur. What an intrapreneur is you do entrepreneurial things while working for someone else.
Okay.
So I have a day job, and I work at Ogilvy, one of the biggest marketing agencies in the world, and it's not, my last name isn't Ogilvy. It's not my company. But that's fine, because I love what I do, and I love working for someone else, and I love the ability to do that kind of work, but I also love the fact that I can go off and write books and do some of these other things as an entrepreneur, while keeping my day job.
Fantastic. We've got to go to break. I want to ask you, because you talk about how simplicity is a secret weapon, so we'll save that for after the break. You're watching We Mean Business. We'll be back in seconds.
When you're on this team, you learn to never give up.
Even if you're down, third-string quarterback, clock ticking,
Hostile environment, exhausted,
you can never lose hope.
There are over 13 million people in the Horn of Africa affected by famine, war, and drought that are counting on us for help.
More people affected than the population of New York City
and Los Angeles combined.
And we can't give up.
Please go to this site and forward the facts about this crisis to everyone you know.
Do more than donate.
Forward the facts.
Welcome back to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman here with Tony Marchanti, and we're here with best-selling author Rohit Bhargava. His newest book, Likeonomics, is what we're talking about. So you talk about simplicity as a secret weapon. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think one question that I've often wondered to myself, and I think a lot of people have probably also wondered, is why Twitter? I mean, why has Twitter become the thing that celebrities and presidents and athletes and everyone uses? Why is everyone on Twitter, right?
And why only 140 characters, right?
And why only 140 characters? And I think, part of the answer to both of those things has everything to do with simplicity. And it's this idea that if I have 100 people or 1,000 people who want to interact with me in a day, I can't possibly do that on email. I can't do it face-to-face. I can't do it via any virtual means. But if you tell each one of those people that they can only interact with me in 140 characters, I can actually deal with that. And it actually gives me an ability to talk to people on scale that I've never had before. And I think that, on one level, is why celebrities have found so much passion for something like Twitter. And it also explains why, in our crowded world where there's, you go into the grocery store and there's 17 different kinds of pasta sauce, right? I mean, what's the difference? Simplicity has become the ultimate competitive advantage. That if you can simplify something, if you can take the model that Flipcam did when they first launched, where every video camera had all these different settings, and they said, you know what? Here's a camera, it has one button, and it has a flip-out USB thing to upload your videos. Because what really mattered to people wasn't necessarily the video quality. It was the ability to take that video and share it with the people that they loved. And every single other video camera on the market was focused on the quality. The better picture was what they all wanted to deliver. And all their marketing talked about that. And then Flipcam came in and said, you know what, we're going to simplify. It's one button. It's all about sharing.
Yeah.
And that worked.
And I wonder if that sort of goes to that famous quote from Steve Jobs, and of course everything that Apple does is simple.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it speaks to that quote where I'm paraphrasing, but something like, sometimes customers don't know what they want until you show it to them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think on some level it requires a vision of knowing what people will like, even though they may not like it at first. And Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook is getting a lot of credit for that right now, because Facebook over the years has had a lot of really negative moments, right? I mean, when they first launched the news feed, everyone hated it. When they first launched the timeline, everyone hated it. And now that people have come around over and over again, Mark Zuckerberg has been found to be this guy who can kind of see what people will get used to and be okay with before they actually like it.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique skill. That's a very unique skill.
This will be just fine, just down the road.
Hang in there. Trust me here.
Yeah.
As a small business owner myself, tell us some tips on how small businesses, or large, but can be more intentional about what they do online and how to create that brand and how to create that likability factor.
Yeah, I think, one thing that's exploding for everyone is online video. And everyone's talking about, you got to get video on your site. You got to get video on your site. And, I'm not the sort of marketer that often jumps on a bandwagon for things. But I think in certain situations, having video is the most powerful way to demonstrate something to someone. So let's say you've got a physical location. You've got a physical location, right? People want to know what that looks like. And a beautified studio, not that you have this, but a beautified studio shot with a wide-angle camera that makes it look like it's 3 times as big as it probably is.
Perfect, yeah.
People they see through that, right? But if you take something like a video and you walk somebody through something like that, the convincing factor is so much higher of something like that. There's an amazing company called the Memphis Drum Shop, and they're basically a drum store. But what they've done is they've used their YouTube channel to do something that I think is unheard of in the music industry, which is if you're a drummer, and I used to play a lot of drums, I don't really play that much anymore, but if you're a drummer, you accessorize a lot. So you have your basic drum kit, and then you buy different cymbals for different sounds. You buy cowbells, you buy percussion, you buy all these different things, and you use them for different songs. So it's not like a guitarist where once you have your guitar, you just basically replace the strings and you're good. With a drummer, you continually buy stuff, right? So we are the women of the music industry because we always accessorize, right. So the Memphis Drum Shop, what they do is they take all these different cymbals and all these different instruments, and they record their team members playing them individually, and they post those individual videos so you can listen to these things, and they have high-quality sound, and on the video at the bottom right, it says, we recommend you listen to this with headphones, because then you'll get the sound of it. Now, no drummer would ever buy anything, usually, without listening to it first. But now what these guys have done is they've taken these videos, and there's not just one of them. There's not just 100 or 1,000. They have over 6,000 videos on this YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Wow. And so now, what have they done? Well, first of all, they've given me some valuable information as a drummer. They've made themselves a destination of choice if I happen to be in Memphis or if I happen to live there. But they've also demonstrated their tagline, which is that they are the experts. That's their tagline. We are the experts. And if they're the experts and they record these videos, well, clearly they're bringing that to life. So I think to answer your question around the power of video, that can, not that your question wasn't around that, I should have made it about that.
Sure.
That's how you can bring that expertise to life. And I think that's a really important thing. If you're in any kind of services-based business, what are you selling? You're selling your expertise. And the more people can get a visual demonstration of that, it doesn't have to be a video. It could be one of the great techniques I saw a couple of small business people do is oftentimes when you get on the phone, if you're an expert, if you're a lawyer or a real estate agent or in any sort of service, you probably get the same questions over and over again.
Right.
So if you start a blog and you answer the top 10 questions in 10 blog posts, all of a sudden what you've done is not only answered the questions that you spend the most time answering, so now you can just send people there, which saves you time, but also you've demonstrated that you're enough of an expert that you have the answers to these questions. And by the way, that's great for Google, because Google ranks that sort of content way higher than any website.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
By the way, the other thing that Drum Shop is doing is they're introducing you to their team. You
That's
said
right.
the team members are the ones that are on
that's
video
right.
doing
Exactly
this stuff.
right.
It has me think of Zappos, the way that they have team members demonstrating each shoe in a quick 30-second video.
Yeah.
Just great.
Well, it's cool when you have that broken down. You've broken down the barriers. People can walk into the store and go, "Oh, I saw you in the video, and oh, I saw you doing this." And it happens to me a lot. People walk in, they feel like they've gotten an up on the next guy coming in the door because they got that start on that personal connection. So big companies, how many still don't get it? Do you run into a lot of CEOs that just go, or I mean, how is that whole trend going? Are we there yet or not?
I think the interesting thing with a lot of big companies is that their struggle isn't that they, as an organization, don't get it. Their struggle is that a lot of them have these independent heroes, these people who have charged forward with social media for whatever their small thing is, and they're doing it well, and they're succeeding at it. And they're becoming a face for the company. One of the things I talked about in my first book was this idea of an accidental spokesperson. That now you don't necessarily choose your spokespeople anymore.
Like Jared, Subway.
Yeah, exactly. He was a great example. But now what's happening is those big companies are struggling with this idea of how do we take this individual pocket of expertise and scale it? How do we do it in such a way so that that value that one person who's really good and really passionate at it has created can be spread across the enterprise? Because part of the reason why that person is probably successful is because they like it, they're passionate about it, and chances are they're good at it. And so now if you take that and you tell someone this is part of your job, to now start updating Facebook pages or to now start tweeting, a lot of times you get somebody who's like, well, I already have a job and that's not part of it. And now you're telling me I got to get good at all these other things? Oh my God. Well, where am I going to find out how to do that, right? How do I figure that out? And that's that momentary sort of panic that's happening across big companies all over the world, really.
I can almost see them kind of that whole, all the information was ours, and now we're getting pulled to let out pieces of it to the individual departments and people, and it's this whole struggle of maintaining the overall brand and the control, but yet realizing that we have to release some of this. We have to not be so pent up.
Yeah, I think part of it is control. I think the other part is just not really knowing how to measure the value of it. Or
ROI.
Yeah, ROI. And if you think about, ROI is sort of the magic expression, right? But if you think about, do you know why ROI was originally created? Who created that? This guy named Jack J. Phillips invented ROI. And the reason he invented ROI was because he was one of these guys who worked on a lot of internal programs, things like training, things like staff development. Stuff that didn't really have a tangible connection to direct sales. And so the biggest challenge for people like that is how do you justify to a company that they should be spending $10,000 a year on training, right? A lot of times you don't draw a direct line between the training and how much you sold. So ROI was a concept he invented to be able to prove the value of intangible activities. Which, if you think about it, social media is an intangible activity a lot of times.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, you can tie, don't get me wrong, you can tie social media directly to sales if you structure it in that way. But if you're building your brand or building a community or engaging in better customer service or more customer loyalty, I mean, these things tend to be a little bit more intangible.
Mm-hmm.
You don't draw a direct line between someone clicked this and then they bought something.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean there's no value. So I think that there is a model for assessing the value, but a lot of times if you just say, well, we have a Facebook page and we have 1,000 fans, how much money did we make from them? That's not the right model to be able to measure whether that has any value or not.
It's such a mindset of thinking, like the way I do it is, I just think that all these little things that I'm doing are going to mean something. And I don't need to get too...
There's like faith there that...
Yeah, you have to go forward on faith. If you say, well, how much is this... I'm shooting a video of me, cleaning soft-shell crabs and teaching people how to do it. How many people did that bring in? How many people bought... you can't get mirrored in the details sometimes, I think, and you just have to trust and faith that it's going to work.
Well, I think there's... I'm a big fan of that, but I think that has to come from the top. It's much simpler for someone who's leading a company to say, I have faith that this is going to work. Mm-hmm. It's much more difficult for somebody who's a marketing director to go to their boss and say, just have faith, it's going to work. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, that's a hard pitch to sell. But, I think the other thing is that if you set it up in the right way, so for example, if you say that your ultimate aim with a Facebook community is to get the people who already buy your product over and over again to talk more about it. Which, there's a value of that, right? Because most businesses will say there's a word-of-mouth referral value to our business. And if we could get our best customers to do something like post a Google review or post a Yelp review or tell 3 friends about us, we would get business from that. We know we would. Mm-hmm. Now, what you're setting up is a online way of engaging people to increase your word-of-mouth. And so what you need to measure is not how many sales do we make, but how much word of mouth did we get? How many Google reviews do we have before we started this? How many do we have after? That's the ROI, right? Not we got 3 more people to come in to sit at the table at the restaurant, for example, because you won't necessarily know that.
Right. That's just safe to say we can think of those as votes, and now we're measuring votes as our ROI?
That's one way to do it. The other way is, a huge ROI metric should be staff retention, which is how happy is your staff, and are they sticking around so you don't have to hire new people. Right? Most small business owners will say the staff issues are one of the toughest things about running a business. Right? If you could just keep your best people for longer, you'd have a measurable impact on your business on everything, whether it's customer loyalty or more butts in seats or whatever you're looking at.
Rohit, in the minute that remains, what are some pitfalls that people must avoid?
I think one pitfall that I talk about a lot in the book is being more likable as a company or a person is not about being nice. You don't just have to be nicer to people. That's not the point. The point is that people have to want to do things for you. They have to want to do things with you. And if you look at Steve Jobs, he's a great example of this. The guy was not nice. He just wasn't. If you look at anything that's ever been written about him in the history of history, he wasn't a nice guy. But he was able to inspire and motivate the people who worked for him. And he did that because he told them the truth. And he said, when something sucked, he told them it sucked. He didn't sugarcoat it. And people loved that about him. The people who worked with him the longest, they loved that. And so I think the lesson we can all take from that is if you can be more likable, you can inspire the people who you work with and your customers to be more loyal, to spend more time with you, to stick around longer, and to spend more and make more money.
Perfect ending to a great show. You've been watching We Mean Business. We've been here with Rohit Bhargava. His new book is called Likeonomics. You can learn more about Rohit and the book by visiting wemeanbiz.tv. So for Tony Marchionte and myself, Steve Dorfman, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.